Ian, we're here at Fronde today. This is a company that perhaps many people are not necessarily familiar with, but you've grown this company quite substantially, more than 300 staff now. So you operate mainly in the technology space. Just explain a little bit about what you do and what the business is involved in.
Sure. At a level, we liberate our client from the technology constraints that are limiting them. So that may be that they have a workforce collaboration and productivity challenge, and we will provide one of our partner tool sets for that. Or they may wish to develop a new channel to market, and we'll support the technology behind that, or a new customer relationship management system. Or that they are spending all of their money just keeping their lights on in their technology space, and they want to take that money away from that area and apply it to things that make them different and great. And we'll come along with our partners and help them divert that money from the base functions that they're undertaking and get that into place so that they can really make the business go better.
So are these bespoke systems, or are these systems that you apply to a range that you already have on your system, I suppose?
Well, they're both. Yeah. So we have a deep pedigree in bespoke software development. So if you have children with a student loan, we built the MSD student loans and allowances system and have supported that for the last 13 years. And similarly, each time you turn the lights on, the electricity is traded through the wholesale electricity market, and we integrated that system twice, in fact. Very, very large, complex integration job through to things like when you pay for your parking on Text-to-Park. We built that system 7 or 8 years ago now. But on the other side, and on the fastest growing side of our business, we will bring our cloud partners to bear. So they are Amazon Web Services and Google and Salesforce and NetSuite. And so we have those partners' products that we can deploy for our clients to make the business go faster.
Would there be a typical client you tend to deal with, or do you deal with the full spectrum of business sizes and scales?
Well, in New Zealand there is a dynamic that says a niche is hard to find, particularly if you're going to grow fast, because it's not that big a country. Having said that, we are a lot of business in government, a lot of business in utility. I think in Australia we have a much better opportunity to develop niche competencies, particularly in areas like broadly distributed workforce, as you have in the travel industry, or insurance or financial services, where we can help our clients decrease their dependence on distributed infrastructure and use cloud infrastructure to simplify their business.
How competitive has this space become? Because I guess early in the piece you probably had quite a dominant position, but there are plenty of other people wanting to challenge into this area. So how do you manage the competitive space?
Well, yes, it is competitive, but not directly. We have relatively few direct competitors because most people who could be our direct competitors have either their own data centre, which they need to utilise before they want to use a cloud data centre, or they have deep relationships with on-premise software vendors, which means they're unlikely to move away from that incumbent revenue stream for a new revenue stream because of the conflicts that creates. So we have all the traditional competitors, as you suggested, and they're strong competitors, but in the space around cloud integration, or cloud service brokers, as Gartner calls us, not that many.
And cloud, of course, is growing really quickly at the moment. Has it surprised you the speed of adoption that cloud is actually really moving into now?
No, on the contrary. I'm stunned at how slowly it's moving, given the business benefits that it generates, and that's in the enterprise space. If you look at small business in particular, they really get it. They understand the benefits that are available and are adopting really fast. Whereas Enterprise is slower to move and government is much slower to move. And there's reasons behind that, the concerns about data sovereignty in particular is foremost in those concerns.
What do you do about that? Because it's interesting that, as you say, the smaller businesses are quick adopters and they see it. And I mean, obviously they're concerned about their data, but perhaps less concerned than the government might be. How is this issue around security being addressed as you see it?
Well, security is another matter. And the security standards of people like Google and Salesforce and Amazon Web Services are extraordinarily high. And there'll be very few, if any, enterprises in this country will match the security standards. So it is less about security, although it is about perceptions of security, and it is more about sovereignty, where the data actually resides. And there are some parts of our country, some sectors, which don't want to contemplate that, such as health. They have struggled to do so. However, to come back to your question, how we deal with that is we work with our clients to understand what parts of their enterprise, what data sets are kind of immune to that sovereign challenge, which might be a public-facing website, or it might be data which is widely publicly available, and therefore it doesn't matter where the data resides. It should reside where it's most efficient and effective to do so. And so we help our clients to understand what their sovereign challenges are and what data sets and what workloads should be moved to a public cloud.
Is the sovereign issue then getting any closer to being solved? Or in 10 years' time, will we still regard sovereignty of data as an important issue?
Oh, look, I think it is being resolved. It has gone away to a substantial extent in Australia, with Amazon building 2 data centres there, and Microsoft is also building data centres in Australia. So once that had happened, once flagship customers like Combank have substantially gone to AWS, then you get a carry through of other people who are saying, well, look, we understand the rigour with which these organisations regard security and sovereignty, and it's good enough for them. It's probably good enough for us.
So there's a certain kind of follow the leader mentality being applied.
There certainly is. But then, of course, it comes a point where enterprises will understand that if they're not there, then they don't enjoy what their competitors are enjoying. Their competitors are able to redeploy all of that expenditure that's going to maintaining legacy infrastructure into competitive advantage. And they'll understand that if they stay doing what they're doing, they're probably going to struggle to remain competitive. Then our government clients, some of them will understand that actually they can make public data much more easily available through public cloud, and they can mobilise services very readily, and so there is a service delivery aspect which really enhances achievement of their goals.
So if we think of the IRD, for instance, that are going to embark on this massive rebuild, I mean, should they be thinking of that being a cloud-based platform?
Whether the whole platform's cloud-based, I doubt that's going to be a starter. But absolutely, there should be aspects of it that are cloud-based. It's difficult to me to see why a public-facing website, such as ours, for instance, needs to be or can be sovereign. And I'm sure there are things like their engagement with some of the tax agents, of which there are many, could benefit from use of cloud technologies. So I think that public cloud should be very much a mix of the IR's transformation plan.
So you mentioned before you're surprised at how slow the adoption is. So when you look around the world and you look at other countries and companies and so forth, you think New Zealand is still behind the 8 ball on this issue?
Certainly behind adoption rates in the US and behind adoption rates in Australia also. US we see much faster adoption of public cloud. Now I guess there aren't the sovereign issues there because there are local data centres, and that will certainly help with adoption rates. And also, it's where most of these global players grew up. So it's where they started.
Realistically, though, we're not going to see Microsoft or Amazon building data centres in New Zealand, though, are we?
Well, I don't think so, and I don't think the model works. If you look at the scale as we understand it, which players like AWS have 5 times the installed capacity of the next 12 players in the market. So the scale is just massive, and when you try and reduce that scale, the economies start going away, and you don't get the massive benefit that you get from these economies of scale. So there becomes a irreducible minimum at which, and I suspect New Zealand is below that.
So when we think about Fronde, where are your fastest growing areas? Where's the real pressure point? Because we know, everybody in the IT space is struggling to find staff and to manage growth and all of those issues. I imagine you're caught up in all of that as well too.
Yes, we are. Well, what we find is a very symbiotic relationship between our cloud integration and our on-premise software development systems integration. So when we go with our very innovative partners to see our clients, we're leaders and innovators, and we get to look at a lot of problems that may in fact have an on-premise solution. And our long relationships with some of our clients with the things we're doing for them, they are looking for leadership from us in areas like cloud integration. So it's a very symbiotic. Both areas are growing. But fastest would be our development on cloud platforms like Force.com, and yes, getting people to support that growth is becoming harder and harder.
Do you have any thoughts? I mean, everybody loves to weigh in on this issue, but do you have particular thoughts as well?
Thank you for asking. I love to weigh in on this issue. Yes, I do. It starts at secondary school, and what we have is our secondary schools are not being resourced with enough skilled teachers in this area, and not being resourced with enough skilled career development people in this area. But I think more fundamentally, parents are still regarding IT careers as either coding or screwdrivers or gaming, and they don't understand IT, and they don't understand that it is a very rewarding, both professionally and financially, professional career, because that's not how it's taught. It is taught as a technical career choice and not an academic career choice. And parents are still steering the most able children away towards academic pursuits. So we have a fundamental problem that, and it's a generational problem, that parents don't understand IT.
So it's almost as though the kids don't need convincing, it's the parents that need the convincing.
Well, I think the kids need convincing as well. They're not getting enough exposure to what IT, and not just IT, but this is the whole technology sector. And we discussed briefly before the interview the TIN 100, and we saw all these wonderful technology companies growing up in New Zealand that are struggling to be resourced with enough local people. And we've got to get, that's an industry challenge also, to do our part to get those stories into the schools and educate the kids and the parents about what's possible.
Because ultimately, there's a certain irony about the whole situation, isn't it? That you've got jobs available, but you just simply don't have the people to get through. How do you deal with this issue though of the teaching? Because it is a real issue. People aren't going to give up very lucrative careers working in the private sector to go and take substantial pay cuts to go and teach. So how do you deal with that issue?
I don't think I've got a solution for that. But we do know that there are people whose vocation is teaching, and don't necessarily want to chase more money in IT because it's different. So I guess we need to work that angle, and we need to work with. Firstly, we as in addition to what needs to happen with people who are being introduced to teacher training, we have to work with the people who are there.
And is this something that really the industry is thinking? Because I mean, people like yourself and Rod Drury and Ian McRae have been sort of going on to this for some time. I mean, is the industry really trying to come together on this issue?
Yes, it is, and there's a couple of industry bodies who are actively getting their members into schools and actively lobbying ministers and government agencies about the need to further develop our at the secondary school level. And I think we are having some impact in that the language we were hearing from the ministers last year was about, well, when there is more demand, we will make more places. And now they have there's a realisation that actually there has to be a demand creation activity which starts at secondary school. So there is some improvement.
When we think of Fronde, 330 staff, so what sort of growth acceleration? I mean, you've been averaging growth over the last 3 years at sort of between 25 and 30%. So what's your acceleration path from this point? You can only see it continuing to rise.
Well, that's right, we can. We think there's a tremendous opportunity there for us. To realise the opportunity, we've got some retooling to do inside. We need growth capital and we need access to more people. Not just in New Zealand, we see our Australian business growing much faster than our New Zealand business. That primarily because it's growing from a lower base and it's a much bigger market. So we won't just be tapping the New Zealand labour market for more people.
And on that capital management issue, how are you dealing with that at the moment? If you are getting those pain points,
well, we're figuring out right now how to get some more capital into our business. We had there was a public report earlier in the year which rated all the public companies in New Zealand and the SOEs on their return on capital employed, and we were second highest in New Zealand. Beaten by Diligent for being first. We were first last year. We have an extraordinarily high return on capital employed, and we believe that we can get some new capital into our business and provide great returns to shareholders with that new capital.
Because you've got an interesting model. You're publicly unlisted. You're not actually on the main exchange, on the unlisted exchange. So why the decision to do that?
Well, look, it's a somewhat historic decision, and I'm not sure I'd wish it on people, but it was made for very good reasons at the time, and that was because the company then Synergy had been growing very, very fast through the 90s, and the founders believed that IPO was going to be the method by which they both introduced growth capital and realised some of their asset, and that required that you had 500 shareholders, and the company set about getting its shareholder numbers up through a variety of mechanisms at the time. Now, when the .com bubble burst, growth stopped for Synergy, and we still had the halfway through executing that mechanism. So that's how it came about. We're a public company then by virtue of the number of shareholders we had, and we wanted to provide a measure of transparency and a trading platform for our shareholders. So hence the unlisted has worked very well for that, although we haven't had much liquidity to speak of really until quite recently.
So that's been a fairly loyal shareholder base.
Oh yes, it has, but I'd say it's been a somewhat long-suffering shareholder base. Also, it's only in the last year that there's been they can really see how they're going to how their capital is going to grow and how they can get some value from their shares.
And what's the big plan from here? Where would you like to see the company in a couple of years' time?
Well, we're thinking in terms of 4 or 5 years. Really, the long run plan is I would love that we build an enduring brand, and I believe that Fronde has some of the innate qualities that can enable us to do that. So whoever our shareholders are, we want to just keep building our brand. We aren't seeking to be sold because we have opportunities wherever we turn. And we have so many ideas that we don't need to be sold to keep on creating value. So we want to grow our business very fast. And we're going to do that in Australia and New Zealand first. So we don't have our share of the Auckland market, we think, that we should have yet, because we're heavily Wellington dominated. So we want to, we're working to improve our brand penetration in our Auckland business. In Australia, we acquired a small company in May this year who are Australia's top NetSuite reseller and implementer. And that's been tremendous for introducing us to a whole new bunch of clients, for bringing some local leadership into the company. And the founders of that business have stayed with Fronde and are now leading Fronde in Australia. We've gained a whole new competency in one of the larger workloads that are going to the public cloud, that ERP space. And we've been able to leverage that back into our New Zealand business. So we're now bringing our New Zealand clients the NetSuite offering. So the next year, it looks like growing that Sydney business very hard and fast, and then leveraging the small Melbourne presence we have to do the same there. And we also have a very small presence in Gold Coast. We think we'll be growing that presence.
So your growth is really only limited by your capacity to attract more staff to join you?
Yes, and our ability to execute. And we've got a lot of new tricks to learn from being a relationship-driven business in Wellington to being a brand and marketing-driven business in Australasia. And so we are bringing on board the senior people who have that expertise, who can help us drive that change through the business that we need to really achieve the potential that we've. I think we're just in a wonderful position that we've created for ourselves. We've got a leadership spot in the cloud integration market locally. We've got the opportunity to claim that position in Australia. We've got 4 fantastic brand partners who are global players in ascendancy. And it's